strongly believe that in the next 10 to 20 years will be the most extraordinary times in Bitcoin that we've ever seen. Anthropic and OpenAI being more popular than Gemini. Even though Google would have been the logical innovator, but OpenAI was faster, Anthropic is faster. Incumbent system has a very hard time of seeing innovation. We are currently entering that mass wave of adoption. We are seeing slowly all capital eventually collapsing into Bitcoin. We're seeing now how Stripe and Stretch and SATA and all of those things are attacking the bond and the income market. We are seeing a lot of products out there that attack real estate very aggressively.
The amount of Bitcoin that's being accumulated cycle in comparison to previous bear cycles, and there's like more daily issuance being gobbled up by these ETFs, corporate treasuries. And prior to the ETF era, you weren't seeing this sort of accelerated siphoning of these new Bitcoin. You see the daily issuance being outbought every single day by this much. It really seems to me that maybe we are entering this accelerated adoption era that you speak of.
I will not shut up about Bitcoin till it's the base layer of the financial industry.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Halving Report podcast. I am your host, Brad Mines. The price of Bitcoin is approximately $73,000 and there's about 686 days left until the next Bitcoin halving. Today, we're having a special guest on the show, quite possibly the hardest working Bitcoin podcaster in the space, Robin Seyr. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for doing this today, man.
Thank you so much, Brad, for having me. It's like, if you think about 2026 and we have 73K, what an amazing opportunity to buy Bitcoin. What an amazing time to build something meaningful within Bitcoin. It's quite extraordinary that we get to see those levels for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like a good deal right now and very underpriced. So like you said, it's really good to try to build things in the bear market because it's the most exciting. There's less competition. It seems like when price goes up, everybody jumps on board. You see that meme where everyone's in line. Everyone's in line to buy at 126K and no one's in line to buy at 73K today, right? Or less people anyways. So it's a good point. I see you've been working hard. Your podcast boasts over 700 episodes, over 500 guests. How are you keeping up with this all, man?
It's easy. Like I'm extremely excited about Bitcoin. I'm extremely excited for the world that we're entering now. And this makes things easy when you have a mission, when you have something you want to work towards, when you know that all the work that you're now doing will pay off in 5, 10, 50 years. And you need Bitcoin, you need some money kind of to have that long time horizon, which is hard because you sometimes get into like the day-to-day of the day is not running that good or the other day is running very good. And you have that roller coaster life, but it's more like a straight line up if you zoom out. The same with the Bitcoin price, the same with your own life. But yeah, it's pretty easy when you look at what world Bitcoin might enable us to live in, what world also AI might enable us to live in, and what the combination of that is. I have that thesis of, and I haven't shared it too much actually on podcasts. I'll probably do that soon at Bitcoin Prague, or depending on when this comes out, maybe it was already there in Prague. The thesis of the great capital shift. I strongly believe that in the next 10 to 20 years will be the most extraordinary times in Bitcoin that we've ever seen. And not only in Bitcoin, but in the whole financial space. We will live through something that we have never seen before. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and I want to get into that. But the important thing is to see why Bitcoin in general is a good technology at the core of it, and then the ecosystem will kind of come and bring Bitcoin from like a $1 trillion asset or $2 trillion asset to it being $100, $200, $300, $500 trillion asset. The core is already there. You already know why Bitcoin is good. Yeah. Now you just have to wait that the ecosystem around it is building.
Yeah, well said. Introduction there into Bitcoin. Before we get too deep into everything, would you mind just giving us a quick introduction of who you are and what were you doing before Bitcoin and kind of how you got your foot in the door with Bitcoin before we dive into some of the deeper topics?
Yeah, it's a really important point that you mentioned here because I do have a background in technology. I worked in IT security. I do have a background before Bitcoin in investing, but just for myself. I just was a guy that was frustrated with the financial system, with the money, and And I naturally looked at every option that is there. I looked at savings accounts. I looked at ETFs. I looked at funds. I looked at even real estate, S&P 500, stock picking, everything I looked through. And this looking through all the options made me come towards Bitcoin. The most interesting thing, I think, is the stock picking, because this is the, I think, most profitable thing that you can do. Maybe real estate if you're smart with banks and leverage and all of those things. But stock picking has some real gainers in there if you really know what you're doing and you dive deep into the stocks. And this was completely my world. But I purposely went all out of this world. I love just being into Bitcoin and not having to care what the news cycle is this week, which you have to care if you are into a stock. If you are into Nvidia stock, Apple stock, Facebook, whatever you are into, you have to care about the news cycle. And so I come from that background. Now, way more interesting is actually where I got my knowledge from. My whole knowledge from Bitcoin comes from my own research, obviously, but the vast majority of knowledge comes from you mentioned it, 500 plus, 600 plus guests that are now about 800 episodes that I've published so far. And so like 800 conversations on Bitcoin with the brightest and the best minds in Bitcoin, like yourself, like Saylor, like Natalie Prunell, Jeff Booth, all the best, basically, that are in Bitcoin, and mostly all of them I already had on the show. And so everything that I talk about, everything that I know is not just like from my brain coming. It stands on the shoulders of many, many giants, like hundreds of great minds in Bitcoin. And this is where I get my thesis around. This is where I get my knowledge from. So if you ask me like, where do I come from? I come from IT security. I come from just being frustrated with the system and investing myself and saying goodbye to the old fiat system because I was frustrated with it. But my knowledge, my experience, my little wisdom that I've gathered with 27 years old comes from many, many great people that I had the privilege of having a conversation with on my podcast.
Yeah, it's really a proof of work if you think about it. You know, you have a library, you can see your conversations develop from your first episodes to your 100th, your second 100. You know, you can really see your development. It's cool to witness that, and I think people really respect that. You keep this content out there, and they can go back and say, "Oh wow, Robin has been doing this for a few years, and he has talked to some of the brightest minds." And and then people that you're getting into Bitcoin, it's not just like, "Oh, Robin has these crazy Bitcoin ideas or beliefs." No. Here's all these bright minds from across the world that all believe the same thing because, in regular day life, yeah, maybe you're still kind of, rare to meet people in real life that are, as diehard Bitcoin as guys like you and I. But, on the world, there's so many of us now. Really awesome to see you continue the podcast, man. Has there been some sort of profound shift at all? Like since you started doing these interviews, talking to so many Bitcoiners, how has your views changed over the time, talking to so many people in the space?
My views have continuously been shaped by many of the people that are into Bitcoin. The most recent shape or the most recent learning for me was that the ecosystem around Bitcoin matters more than we think. And maybe I'll explain that a little bit more in detail because I think it's an interesting perspective on how technology gets adopted. There's many different technologies that we could look at comparing it to Bitcoin. And we've done it with internet, we've done it with mobile, we've done it with gold, we've done it with so many different technologies. I mean, the printing press has been compared to Bitcoin. We've done it with almost every single technology. I'm lately really obsessed with the comparison with a car. Maybe because of the reason that I love cars, but the car technology is really an interesting one because when you look at the early technology, I mean, there was the steam engine car that was self-propelled already. And it was before 1886. But the car as we know it, the first one from Benz came out in 1886. This was a similar engine, like kind of the similar engine that we already have now. And it was kind of the first one in a very long line of cars. And the first car, 1886, was driving with 16 kilometers per hour, which is very slow. Just as a reminder, just in April this year, the fastest marathon runner for the first time ever, a human being, was running under 2 hours, which means he was running over 21 kilometers per hour. So a human being was faster than the first car was, and he was able to hold that speed for a longer period of time. He was holding that speed for 42 kilometers. The first car was only able to go for 40 kilometers. And there was no gas station. There was no paved roads. There was no mechanics, no supply chain like that. The whole ecosystem around the car was also not there yet. But fast forward from 1886 to 1901, the car was developed. And it got, instead of 3 tires, already 4 tires. It got a little bit more comfy seat. The car was going for a longer range. The car was going not 16 kilometers per hour, but it 10x the speed to 111 kilometers per hour. And so the car was getting better, but still almost nobody used it. And I was thinking, like, why is that? Why didn't many people adopt the car in the first 15 years? What was the people holding back from adopting the car as a technology? Because there were many iterations before the 1901 car that got already 100 kilometers per hour. And even if a car has only 50 kilometers per hour, 40 kilometers per hour, it's already amazing. And the horse had 45 kilometers per hour as a top speed. But when you sit back in the carriage, it maximum has like 20, 25 kilometers per hour. The car basically 2 years after the first one was already faster than that. So there's no core argument of saying the car was so much worse and that's why people didn't adopt it. But the ecosystem around it was not there yet. And the incentive and the consensus was not there around it. So there is this picture that you see sometimes in the Bitcoin ecosystem, where on the right side you see the New York City street on Easter morning, where there's one car and a bunch of horses, and then there is on the other side, on the left side, there is one horse in the sea of cars. And between those two pictures were just 13 years. And so now I thought to myself, how the heck did it take 15 years to go to one car in the street? And then it took another 13 years to go from 1 to like 99% adoption. Like how did so much adoption happen in this like very short period of time? And I researched and I came to know about 3 different forces that drive that innovation forward, that are more important than the just core technology that we always think of being so important. The first one is obviously incentives. The incentives are clear. The horse has no stamina. The horse has to sleep. The horse can get sick. The horse has horrible hygiene. It's very clear why a car is better than a horse, even at that time already. So the incentives are aligned. The same with fiat. If you compare fiat to Bitcoin, or you compare bonds or real estate or gold or stocks to Bitcoin, it's very clear. You have limitations like KYC. You have to KYC yourself if you buy a home. You have to KYC yourself if you buy anything. Bitcoin is the only thing that is where you are able to buy it KYC free, fully, because it's money and it's permissionless. The next point is permission. You need a permission to buy a home. You need a permission to make a bank transaction. You need a permission if you want to buy a stock. You need a permission for everything in the fiat world. For Bitcoin, you do not need a permission. You can just do it. There are many other reasons, many other incentives that speak for Bitcoin. against real estate, against gold, against fiat currencies, against all of the other things. Now, covers the first force that has to be there. If the incentive is not there, nothing else matters for the future development of that technology. But this is already there for Bitcoin, and you kind of can see, okay, like why is it not moving forward? The second aspect is already more interesting, because the second aspect second force of why something gets adopted, in my opinion, is the infrastructure. Infrastructure is not that sexy of a topic, but it's very important for something to be adopted. What do I mean by infrastructure? Let's go back to the car. There's core technology and there's the ecosystem of the car. And the core technology of the car is the engine, the lights, the seats, the tires, all of what the car actually is. But then there's the ecosystem around the car. Are the roads paved? Are there gas stations? Because imagine driving a car where there's no gas stations. You would need to drive very low distances and always come back to your home where you can store the fuel for yourself. Like, how do you even get the fuel? It's without gas stations, the car does not make sense. The same with mechanics. If there are no mechanics that repair your car in case it breaks down, why would you buy one? Why would you adopt one? Those are ecosystems that have to be developed. Supply chains. There's a lot of ecosystems around the car. The same now with Bitcoin. We have the core technology, and I want to be very clear. I don't mean Bitcoin core with that. I mean the consensus rules. I mean the nodes. I mean the miners. Those are the core technologies of Bitcoin that drive Bitcoin. That is the engine of the car, is the tires of the car, is the seats of the car, whatever you want to pick at. But we need the ecosystem. Ecosystem is the exchanges, the wallets, the service providers, the custodians that help you custody it, all the outside world, the ecosystem, the UI and UX of Bitcoin. And also to that ecosystem counts a strategy with stretched building on top of Bitcoin. Lightning is an ecosystem of Bitcoin. All of those things are just starting to be adopted. I mean, how many people actually used Lightning once a month for the last 12 months? Like, how many people are this really? Not a lot, very few. How many people heard about digital credit and strategy and all of those things? Is that in any way, shape, or form mainstream? Not at all. Like, not even a little bit. And all those ecosystem things around the core technology of Bitcoin have to be developed in order for Bitcoin to be adopted very fast. Now, the last one is a tricky one. I called it consensus, but you could also call it the social layer of Bitcoin. The social layer means if I tell my neighbor in 2011 that I own Bitcoin, he tells me, he asks me, what the heck is Bitcoin? Nobody knew about Bitcoin back then. If I tell the same neighbor in 2017 that I own Bitcoin, he tells me I'm a criminal, I'm in a scam, like whatever. If I tell someone in 2021 about Bitcoin, I get the answer, oh, it's too bad for the environment. It might be a good idea, blockchain might be a good thing, but it's too bad for the environment. Now I tell someone about Bitcoin, they're saying, oh, it's too volatile. It just like goes down 50%. Like, there's always reasonings why someone doesn't get into Bitcoin. But if you listen closely to those reasonings, even the critics of Bitcoiners are now accepting that Bitcoin is there and won't go away. They're attacking, even if you listen at the environment argument against Bitcoin, which no longer is in the Bitcoin realm, but 2021 was in the Bitcoin realm very prominent. They don't argue that Bitcoin is going to zero. They're saying it's bad. And with them saying it's bad, they legitimize it. People are saying cars are bad. People are saying trains are bad. People are saying all kinds of things. If you're acknowledging that it's bad, you're acknowledging that it's there, that it exists, and that it's a real thing. And so we went from what the heck is Bitcoin to acknowledging that it's there to now like, oh, that's an interesting idea. Oh, I should also maybe get some Bitcoin. Oh, it's been already around for 15, 16 years. That's a consensus social layer. There's like, I'm planting my flag, I'm a Bitcoiner, and the neighbor might also do it. The other neighbor might not. Then this neighbor might convince the swimming coach of him to also adopt Bitcoin. That social layer needs time. And so now we've got all those three forces coming together. And I think in the next 10 to 20 years is the hardest adoption wave of Bitcoin ever. It's the strongest time to be into Bitcoin because of those three forces. Now I don't know exactly. I spoke so long that I forgot what your initial question was. But this is my strong belief, what I think Bitcoin is currently going through and where we will end up and what it takes also in the next 10 years to actually get to a bigger adoption rate than what we have now with like a few percent to 50, 60, 70% adoption.
Yeah, well, one interesting thing I like to look at recently is the amount of Bitcoin that's being accumulated this cycle in comparison to previous bear cycles. And there's like, how many times more daily issuance being gobbled up by these ETFs, corporate treasuries. And last, these cycles prior to the ETF era, you weren't seeing this sort of accelerated siphoning of these new Bitcoin that's being minted every day. And when you see the daily issuance being outbought every single day, by this much, it really seems to me that maybe we are entering this accelerated adoption era that you speak of. So you think we're already in this era, and like this cycle, next cycle, and then possibly and then into the next 4-year cycle after that. You think these is like what you're saying is this is like the greatest time, or possibly like the greatest amount of adoption we're going to see?
Yeah, and it's always hard to like pinpoint exactly when adoption happens because humans are very complex creatures when it comes to adoption, because there are 8 billion humans on Earth, and we kind of see patterns, we kind of see where we are in the adoption waves, but it's not clear what exactly is this mass point of adoption. I personally believe we are currently entering that mass wave of adoption. We are seeing slowly all capital eventually collapsing into Bitcoin. We're seeing now how Strive and Stretch and SATA and all of those things are attacking the bond and the income market. We are seeing a lot of products out there that attack real estate very aggressively, where with Horizon or Strava or something like that, there are a couple of companies that attack real estate directly. If you're a homeowner, you can just take out the monetary value out of that home and put it directly into Bitcoin. We see real estate people selling their homes to directly buy Bitcoin. So we're seeing all of those buckets where capital currently is siphoning into Bitcoin, flowing into Bitcoin. And so if I had to guess, we are currently in year 1 or year 2 of this massive shift. And people overestimate what can happen in 1 year and underestimate what can happen in 10 years. It's a very famous saying. And the next 10 years will be transformative for Bitcoin. And just look back what happened in the last 10 years in Bitcoin. I mean, now it's 2026. Where was Bitcoin in 2016? I don't even know. But it was so early. I'll just quickly check it. Bitcoin USD. Let's check 2016. That was been such a low price point. Yeah, it was like $400, something like that. And so think about all the developments that happened through the last 10 years just in Bitcoin. There was not a single publicly traded company in Bitcoin. There was not a single big politician talking about Bitcoin. There was not a single TradFi instrument like an ETF around Bitcoin. There's nothing that we now have developed in Bitcoin. I mean, the Lightning Network was not even close to what it is now. All the other layer 2 solutions wasn't even close to what it is now, or wasn't even existing. So in 10 years, a lot of development is happening. And we now already have so much that the next 10 years will be crazy. Just as a reminder, coming back to the car example, long-term things, crazy things can happen. Think about the guy in 1886 having a horse carriage sales company and thinks, yeah, that car is kind of cute, kind of nice, but it doesn't bother me. It's the same guy that thinks that Netflix isn't attacking his business model, that cell phones are not that important, and all on the internet is just a passing fad. Because he cannot imagine that the car can not only go 16 kilometers per hour, but 100 kilometers per hour. And now we have cars that go 500 plus kilometers per hour. And he can definitely not imagine a car driving itself. Even here in Europe now, we have in Netherlands and Estonia, cars driving itself completely. Even in Germany, I think some companies have the license to do that. So it's like, how did we come from a horse to a car to a self-driving car through like 140-year development? And the first 15, 10, 20 years are usually very slow. So also with the printing press, it was the same thing. The first 15 years, we printed, I think, like a few hundred books with the printing press. The Gutenberg Bible was the first one. And then in the next 15 years, we printed a few million books because the technology spread, the protocol spread across Europe and not just in one small area in Germany. And so once the technology hits a certain point, it gets adopted very rapidly and very fast. And Bitcoin is money, and with capital like money, it's even faster and even stronger. It's even because there's thing you can lose. Like that, you can lose literally everything. If you switch from a horse to a car, if you use a horse, you're not losing a lot. The horse cannot go to zero. The horse cannot crash and just burn. But if you're using an inferior type of an asset to save your capital, this can literally go to zero and evaporate. That's why this fear of missing out, this massive drastic shift towards Bitcoin will happen very rapidly and very aggressive, in my personal opinion.
Now, what would you say to skeptics who think, we need this inflationary system where we can, have, an inflationary currency needed to expand the economy? If everyone's, just incentivized to save all their Bitcoin and not spend it, the economy may suffer.
Yeah, it's a frustrating argument because they haven't studied history. They haven't studied that we actually benefit from having capital. So if you look at, first of all, like for Bitcoin to succeed, fiat doesn't need to die. I think it might die, but Bitcoin success is not automatically meaning that fiat is completely vanishing and dying. So we can still have a fiat currency that is expanding and is financing political things, and Bitcoin being a $300-400 trillion asset, like 200x more than today. So those two things can be true at the same time. But let's say Bitcoin is actually the monetary layer and there is no fiat anymore. What drives innovation? What is true innovation really driving? You need capital. And so in a world where capital is accelerating, in a world where capital is actually, you gain more over time because it's not inflationary, where it's deflationary, where the capital is actually compounding over time. If you save it, will make more humans possible for them to invest in their own good. If you are a Bitcoiner since 15 years, you have a lot of capital to spend on projects, on innovations. And it's actually what I see with a lot of OG Bitcoiners. They held on to their Bitcoin, they saved and invested in their Bitcoin, and now they're like, I want to start that startup. I want to build a citadel there. I want to do something in the Bitcoin ecosystem. I want to help that politician because I think he's doing a good job in that regard. So like whatever it is, having capital is the basis of every entrepreneurship, of every entrepreneurial adventure. Because without the capital, it's hard to operate. Now, up until now, if you need a lot of capital, it's hard to save your way there. So you needed investors. There's a lot of dependencies with printing a lot of money. And so it also worked out. But if you just have cheap capital everywhere, you are subsidizing a lot of projects that never work out. They never find product market fit. They never have anything interesting to offer. So with a hard money standard, you filter out the bad projects and you focus the capital on the good projects, which is, I think, what we want. We want that more capital is flowing into companies and the products and the services that actually provide a real value to society and actually have the chance to move the needle. If we have capital, cheap capital that is flowing in every single asset, in every single company, even if it doesn't do anything good for society, that is not good for society. It's a very logical point. So that being said, as I stated in the beginning, I'm not necessarily the belief that fiat has to die just for Bitcoin to succeed. Bitcoin can be a $500 trillion asset and fiat can still be around and cheap capital can still be around. There's always also private venture funds there. They might just be Bitcoiners and they just give you Bitcoin and sats for that. There will always be rich people that want to support young entrepreneurs. There will always be credit. There will always be lending in all of the, like, we sometimes think now there's a Bitcoin ecosystem, Bitcoin standard, and we stop doing money things that we have done since hundreds and thousands of years just because we have like the same was true on the other monetary standards. So, first of all, I don't think even in a fully Bitcoinized world that will happen. And second of all, I think it would be a good thing if it happens.
Yeah, interesting take there. Like a lot of Bitcoiners will come out and be, they're completely anti-fiat. Bitcoin's a Trojan horse to, whatever, replace banking systems and as general. But, there's a lot of nuance. There's so many different financial products out there and people are going to build that around Bitcoin. And that kind of ties back into this, this infrastructure that's being built right now that we're seeing. And I know you talked about this already, but if you don't mind, give us maybe a little preview of what you're working on. Thesis, the great capital shift.
Like I'm early in this writing this thesis, and every day I'm digging deeper. I'm getting more excited about it. It's really interesting to look at history. History teaches us so much, and I wish I had the same excitement for history when I was in school, because back then I hated history. Let's focus on the future, not the past. But actually learning about the past, seeing the past, especially the history of science, but also all the other aspects of history, teach you a lot about the future. And if you are a student of history, if you learn about what's happened with the internet, with the printing press, with the car, with the steam engine, with all those different technologies, you actually gain a better appreciation for what's Bitcoin and what's to come for Bitcoin. And so I strongly believe that learning about history will make you a better human being in the present world and will make you a human being that will build better things for the future world. And so that's what I try to do. And I just studied myself, and now I'm kind of writing it down and seeing where my thesis leads me. But the core of the thesis is all capital will very quickly collapse into Bitcoin. Now there's two more interesting aspects that we could dive into. It's the legacy lens, and it's the AI, focus. The legacy lens is something I discovered through a lot of conversations from my podcast guests and then going back to my normal life. And you probably had that also when you have podcast guests and you talk with them and you have a nice conversation with them. And then you go into the normal world and you have a conversation with a bank advisor, some fiat guy. And you think like, how the hell is he so blind to Bitcoin? And there's two components to that. The first one is he is a fish in the water in a system where he benefits from. First aspect of that is the famous meme of the fish and the fish in the water. If you think about a guy that is 55 years old and is working all of his life in the banking industry, and he's called an expert in the field. Or you have someone that is working in a DVD store for all of his life, and he's considered a movie expert, a DVD expert, a media expert. When you think about those two examples, if Netflix comes around or Bitcoin comes around, they immediately dismiss it out of two reasons. Because the first reason is they are within the system. And if you're within the system, it's very hard to imagine a new system. That's kind of why innovation rarely and almost never happens within a system. It always happens outside of a system. That's why we now have Anthropic and OpenAI being more popular than Gemini. Even though Google would have been the logical innovator, but OpenAI was faster and Anthropic is faster, and they are currently having the lead in the market. Maybe Gemini can turn around and have a better product and might actually win in the end, but the incumbent system has a very hard time of seeing innovation. And so if you're the fish in the water that doesn't see the water and can't imagine life on land, life without water, it's very hard. This is the first kind of aspect of like he's in the system. Then the second aspect ties into the first aspect. It's he might even be dependent on the system. A guy working in a bank thinking about the system on Bitcoin, he's like, how the heck do I make money? How the heck do I get food from my family? The same with the DVD store. It's like, okay, how do I do that? How can I make that happening? And so Netflix was the innovator there. They also had the physical store, but they were bright enough to look outside of the system and invent a new system to disrupt their old system. Those are the true innovators in the space. And it's very hard for banks to see. There are some banks that actually embrace Bitcoin, but most don't. And so this is where I think this is where the legacy lens comes in. Those are the people, those are the companies that cannot imagine a system that is different because they are so deep into the system. And they're looking through everything through that one system. So they're measuring Bitcoin in the US dollar, in the euro, in the yen, in whatever currency you're using. Because in that system, they feel comfortable and they're like, okay, it's just a stock. And if you're looking at Bitcoin as just a stock, it's not that interesting because it's just another trade that will end at some point. The same as that same will happen with Nvidia, Apple, and Google, and Amazon. Those are the biggest companies right now. 15 years ago, the biggest companies looked very different. 20 years ago looked very different. 100 years ago, the 10 biggest companies looked very different. And so if they just look at Bitcoin as like the stock, just like as a volatile thing, and it's not really that good because it's like very volatile, and it's currently in a bear market, it probably goes to zero. Like if that's your view on Bitcoin, you just put on the legacy lens. You're looking through the old system on a new system. That's an aspect that I go quite deep on in the book because I'm always fascinated how a guy that is an expert in the field doesn't understand that he's about to be disrupted. Because in my initial thought, this would be the guy that understands it first, but often that's the guy that understands it last or second to last. Now, the second aspect is, I think, the more interesting one. It's the AI aspect. What if Bitcoin is sucking up all the financial energy in the world and all the monetary premium that is in gold, real estate, and all the different financial assets? What does AI do? It's driving down the cost of production to the cost of energy. What do I mean by that? Let's take real estate as an example, because I think it's a very good example. Real estate has a certain price, and a very big part of the price is the monetary premium, because people save in real estate. And so Bitcoin is sucking out of that real estate property that monetary premium. The remaining part of the price is the cost of production. This is the labor that it took to build a home. It's the contracts, it's the lawyers, it's the material, the resources, all of it. What if you don't need an architect? You have Claude. What if you don't need a guy that actually puts the stones on top of each other to build a home? What if you have a robot to do that? What if even the resources are free to manufacture just with the cost of energy? Because also for the resource making or harvesting, you have a robot and Claude to do that. Then eventually your cost of producing a home will collapse to the cost of running the robots and running the brains and maybe like one guy that looks it all over. Like, I think humans are stupid enough to always put a guy in charge. That might be part of it. I think humans are afraid of letting AI completely take over. So they might just, like, every product has like one project manager that just overlooks like 50 different AI versions that do a lot of work for him, and he just sits there and stares at the screen to see if all the things are ticking out as they should tick out. But this eventually collapses the cost of production to the natural cost of energy, and Bitcoin is sucking out the monetary premium. So you will have the crazy thought, and now I know with Gen Z, millennials, it will be a very crazy thought, but you will have the crazy thought that real estate, owning your own home, will be very cheap, very, very cheap. It will be super easy to just buy a home. Buying a home in the future will be easier than buying a car right now. A car is a more expensive good than a home in the future. So a car right now is a more expensive good than a home in the future, because the monetary premium will be sucked out and the cost of producing a home will continuously trend towards the cost of the energy. And so this is another part of the great capital shift that we haven't explored before. What is AI and the enhancement of technology doing to the cost of goods, to the cost of the world? Are we entering kind of an abundant world? And my personal belief is yes.
You mentioned, these lowering cost of, building a house, and, a car is going to be worth more, but like, wouldn't the cost of a car assembly eventually go to zero too? And like, how would this affect, like, how would this be any different than, I guess, a house?
Yeah, everything will collapse to, sorry if I wasn't clear enough on that, because I compared a car right now to a house in like the future, but like everything eventually collapses to the cost of energy. And that's kind of the big mind fuck that I had when I was writing it down and researching. Okay, so you have AI and robotics, and what if they can do more and more things? What if they can produce more and more, if they can produce more homes, if they can produce more fighter jets, if they can produce more food? I mean, like everything eventually becomes abundant because it collapses to the cost of energy. Now, the question is, what is the cost of energy? Because we will have a lot more need for energy at that point. That's another question. I'm not smart enough yet to answer that. It's a rabbit hole I haven't gone down very far, but there are people that believe that energy will be abundant. Then it's a really interesting question. If energy is abundant, so that you can just like power up whatever the heck you want to power up, and AI and robots can basically produce almost everything. Like that's a very difficult world to wrap your head around. But that's not happening in the next 10 years. Like when I talk about the great capital shift being very strong, developed in the next 10 years in Bitcoin, I'm not talking about in 10 years we will have an abundant future where everything just like is costing basically zero. That's like the 140-year kind of timeline, not the 10-year timeline.
Okay, so the great capital shift, this new thesis that you're working on is in line with AI, robotics, and these contemporary things that are happening right now. And it's basically going to change the world and change the economy into a world we've never seen before.
100%. Yeah. Like this is, I mean, I'm not the first one to say that. I mean, I think Jeff Booth already with The Price of Tomorrow made a similar argument that that technology is deflationary and brings the cost down of goods. I think it's not a new argument, but I try to bring the historical view on that, bring Bitcoin and AI together in one thesis. And when I discovered that and I was writing and researching that, I was kind of blown away myself. I was like, that's a kind of crazy world because I never understood the thesis of a post-money world. But imagine now Bitcoin and AI actually succeed in the most extreme way. Why do we then still need money if everything is abundant? When everything is kind of there, we might need some money to like organize some things, but I don't know, like it's a really interesting thought to think AI and Bitcoin to the end, not just like, okay, how will it be in the next 10 years, but how will it be in 100, 200 years?
Yeah, you have a really long time horizon, which is good for hodling Bitcoin and just investing in general. And so I'm just wondering, like, you seem like a guy with a lot of grit, like he's passionate for long-term goals. You know, you building this podcast over the course of years. Is there anything else? Or I know you're all in with this Bitcoin and making this your full-time job and, you know, progressing as much as possible. Is there anything else that you're as passionate about or that you work on the side like this for such a long term?
I mean, it ties into the podcast. I'm quite passionate about personal branding. I'm very passionate about building and working on your own personal brand. I mean, it ties actually back to the great capital shift. I might actually put that in the book. I don't know if I do. It's just another aspect of what that world looks like and how to create value in this new world. Because if you think about AI, and let's just take ordering pizza as an example. You have robots that get you pizza. You have robots that understand you and know you, that interact with you. And you tell the robot, I want a pizza. The robot knows all the pizza places that are close to you. The robot knows what pizza you want. You just say, I want a pizza. The robot goes ahead and like your wife would know, or maybe even better, the robot probably knows better than your wife what kind of pizza you want, what kind of pizza you need, what kind of calories you already ate, all of those things. And then it goes ahead and gets you that. But what if branding comes in that equation? Because humans, and I do one of two things. They say, hey, I want a pizza. Then it just brings you any random pizza and it commoditizes all pizza places because the robot thinks about what is the best possible value for the price I'm paying. But what if branding comes in there? And branding is very powerful because then you can say, then the guy doesn't say, hey, I want a pizza. The guy says, hey, I want a pizza from Pizza Man or from Domino's or whatever. And all of a sudden, the robot just focuses on Domino's, on the Pizza Man pizza. And that's the power of personal branding. And that's what I think also will always have value, the human connection, the meeting in real life. Like, why the heck a conference is a thing? Think about it. You can listen to every single keynote online. And I would make the argument that a lot of YouTube videos are 10 times better than most of the talks at conferences. Why are people still going there? Because they love the human connection. Most of the people there listen to maybe one or two talks. They want to see their favorite creator, their sailors, their whatever. But most of the times they're connecting with other human beings. So my one big part of the thesis is that personal branding will matter more than ever because people want to connect with other human beings and other connections, especially when there's more and more artificial intelligence out there and artificial things. I mean, people are already mad at AI slop posts and AI slop videos because they just don't feel as personal, as authentic, and as nice. So they're saying, the hell with that. And I want to have a real human doing that. And I don't know how the world looks like. Maybe in the future we have to meet in person for a podcast and do some blood exchange and kind of prove that we're human, for people to think it's valuable content and don't think it's just two AIs talking to each other. Because I strongly believe that personal connection, the human connection, will be a very big part of the future, especially when everything gets digital. Why are tens of thousands of people coming to Bitcoin conferences? It does not make sense, logical. It's an emotional human connection thing.
Yeah. It's a good pivot point to talk about these conferences. I know you've been attending. You have another conference coming up. Do you mind just telling us, so what do you get out of these conferences, and what's been your role? I know you've been invited onto the stage and have some conversations now. So what's been your experience from that?
Yeah, it's really fun, because if you think about a cost to value analysis, it does not make sense. Like, if I have a keynote on BTC Prague, I probably get, I don't know, 1,000 people, 2,000 people in front of me, which is cool. And then there might be online watching another 10,000 people, or maybe 5,000, or maybe just 1,000. Let's see how the video performs. So that's kind of like, okay, maybe you reach 2,000 people, maybe you reach 5,000 people. If I just take my own podcast and see the average view that I get 3 times a week, is like 3, 4, 5,000. So I'm on a Bitcoin Prague keynote stage 3 times a week, and it costs me nothing. The production cost of that is literally nothing. What does it cost me to do? It costs me 1-2 hours to produce, 1-2 hours to post-produce, and some licenses for some software companies, but it's like nothing. It's maybe 4 hours plus 10 euros if you add it all up. What does it cost me to get to Prague? The train tickets itself costs more than everything else, because the train ride costs me 8 hours back and forth, and the train tickets costed me, I think, 50 or 60 euros back and forth. It's quite cheap actually to go from Vienna to Prague, but that alone, just the train ride, costed me more time and more money than making free videos. And so when you think just from a cost analysis perspective, I should just be at home and crank out as many videos as possible. Not a question, why was I at 8 conferences last year, and why was I already this year at 3? I think this is the 4th conference I go in Prague now. So why do I do that? The first and the only logical answer is human connection. And the third order effect is kind of intangible. It's like hard to put a value on that. But the human connection leads to something more. Because MicroSeed, for example, the company I co-founded, came out of Bitcoin Prague and Las Vegas, because I had made a human connection with other people there. That's like 100% true. I would have not co-founded that company without going to those conferences. So think about, MicroSeed is a small company. I'm not saying we will scale. I'm not saying we'll ever have an exit, but think about an exit in that business, which would maybe in the future will be successful. That one tiny connection I made there at a conference paid off 1,000 times for all the time and money invested in going to those conferences, if you want to justify it to yourself from the money perspective. But I would make the argument on the human side. Just connecting with human gives me so much energy, and the flair of that is like so cool. And so that's why I love going to conferences. I try to go to meetups also. I try to just connect with other human beings in the Bitcoin space, because it feels good, because it is a nice thing to do, just because I like the human connection. So you could make the argument for money, but I would always argue for the human connection side of things.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very healthy to go and speak to like-minded people, right, in real life, and not just online all the time, right? Human conversations are so valuable. Like, even sitting here, like, this is great, Robin, but speaking over a microphone and a video is definitely not the same as talking in real life. And you can have this fast flow of an exchange of ideas, with other people that are, always studying Bitcoin or using AI to develop their skills and develop their knowledge, and to get together and talk about these things in real life is super important. I know you have a lot of these conversations. Do you ever get Bitcoin fatigue? Like you're always having a conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of overlapping conversations. Well, what are your thoughts around that?
Not really. Saylor is famous for quoting some politicians saying, if you tell a person something for 42 times, they might remember it at the 41st time, something like that. And so there's the side of like, am I getting bored, or do the people that watch get bored? Both don't really happen for me, because there's always some nuance and some new things in there. But I think it's even more important if you really want to drive Bitcoin, we kind of have to push the same things and the basics over and over again. I mean, since the beginning of the podcast, I started talking about self-custody, why it's important. I talked about why Bitcoin is better than every single other asset, why all the other assets will flow into Bitcoin. It's the same thing I'm still talking about. Like you could make the argument. You can make the positive argument of I've not changed my mind. I've not changed my message in 6 years. But you could also make a negative argument saying I haven't learned a single thing. Like I'm still saying the same thing in like 6 years. So I don't know. I think there's value in repetition. There's value in going deeper, and there's a lot of nuances, of course, that I learned. I mean, when I started the first podcast episode, I didn't even know what UTXO management is. Like I had no clue. I had never heard that word. So I learned that from a podcast cast. And then someone told me, hey, UTXO management is very important. So I invited 2-3 experts in that field on my podcast, and I learned everything there is to know about it. And I researched myself even more. And then I'm like, I got that topic now. And so like there was never a week where I recorded podcasts where I didn't go out and said, I learned something new. Like every single week I've learned something new. And yeah, there's overlapping things, but people like that. Like people talk about the same things over and over and over again. Conversations don't change that often. They can get boring, but it's for some reason not. I don't know. Humans are very weird species. And like, did you ever had a friend that you basically have the same conversation over and over again, of like that one football game or that one like football club that you always go to, or like it's like
yeah
we have those kind of things, and it's kind of nice and comforting.
Yeah, you can think of so many topics and debates that always come up. You're right. A lot of conversations are very repeating, and humans are habitual creatures. We do need habits in our lives and repetition to remember things. That's how we learn new languages and new skills. So this is exactly right. So that's a really good point. But I've heard you talk a lot about STRC and SATA. You obviously have some interest in these financial products. Are you personally invested, or is this kind of just something that is one of the more exciting things in Bitcoin, or is it the most exciting thing in Bitcoin right now?
I think the most exciting Bitcoin is always that you can take self-custody and you can just go F you to everyone. That will always be the most exciting thing in Bitcoin. But it's a very interesting thing. A full disclosure, I'm invested a little bit in strategy. I'm invested a little less in ESST, so Strive, the common shares. And I have a tiny position in Stretch just to test it out, actually, just as a full disclosure before we even start talking about that. I'm still not 100% sure if I will keep those positions. I'm still not 100% sure if I think they might be able to outperform Bitcoin. I'm still not 100% sure how important they are in the overall Bitcoin thesis, overall Bitcoin adoption. But what I'm sure about is that those instruments, or instruments that will look like that, will transform Bitcoin and will bring more mainstream adoption than most things I do, most things we content creators do. And so I have an example. I've told most of my friends and relatives and colleagues around Bitcoin for a very long time. And it's always a very hesitating answer of like, oh, okay, I can look at it. Like, oh, okay. Like very slow. Like very rarely a person goes like, oh, Bitcoin, tell me everything. I want to learn about it. Like I've never heard that. Since I started learning about Stretch, I told a few people about like, and researching this stretch product. I'm like, oh, interesting. What is that? Oh yeah, it's that stock that just keeps the value at the same level. So like the principal that you put in there just stays the same, and they just pay you an 11% dividend. And they're like, where can I buy that? I want an 11% paid monthly. Heck yeah. Paid soon semi-monthly, 11.5%. 100% I'll take that. It's interesting for me how quick people are jumping on that. Because if you think about it, Bitcoin is paying not 11%, but Bitcoin probably pays you 30% per year. So they're sacrificing a lot of basis points for what? Short-term stability, a paycheck monthly in your account. Like those are valuable things, but I'd rather have a 25, 30, 35 KG asset over 10 years than an 11.5% KG asset. That's not that exciting, but it might be because I'm not looking to retire. I don't have cash flow issues. I don't have the need for short-term capital that pays me an 11.5% interest. But a lot of people apparently do have that need. And everyone that I tell about that is like, ooh, I want a piece of that. And you can see at the volumes that Stretch and SATA is getting into the Bitcoin ecosystem. That thing clearly has a lot of demand. So what can I say? That might just be the paved roads for the car that we needed, the gas stations that we needed, the stripping out the volatility to get to mainstream adoption. And yeah, maybe it's better for Bitcoin that we all buy it ourselves, that we all have it in self-custody, and we straighten out the volatility that way. That's probably better for Bitcoin. But it's not about what's better for Bitcoin or what we wish or what we want to happen. It's what actually will happen, like the reality of it. And the reality of it, people don't want the volatility. And all the people that are okay with the volatility are already in Bitcoin. Like, if you're okay with the volatility and understand Bitcoin, why aren't you in Bitcoin yet? Like, I question myself, like, how many more people that are true Bitcoiners can we gather? I don't think that many. Most people will be Bitcoiners through proxy products like a Stretch, like a SATA, like instruments like that. But yeah, I'm still looking at them because I wanna look at them very critically, because in the past we had a lot of the instances of a new token promising us a better Bitcoin. I'm very critical of that, but so far from everything I've seen, they look very stable and very promising for the Bitcoin's future.
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, these products, like, they're probably, part of this larger infrastructure that we're going to see. A lot of people, have a short time. They don't have this, 140-year time horizon like you have, Robin. So a lot of people are thinking, what's happening next week or what's going on. I can't think past too far ahead. So maybe Stretches and these other products are going to be a better answer for them, or they're simply in a different part of their life than you. That you're working, maybe you have income, and maybe they just need something that's not going to be possibly down 10, 20, 30, 40% in a short-term horizon. So that was very well said, Robin. I think I heard you say on another podcast, 2017 was kind of the year that you kind of got into this space, and then within a couple of years you started the podcast. Is there anything that could happen with Bitcoin where you're like, my work is done here, let the community go. I'm going to go and, live on an island with my Bitcoin and, watch the world from afar or something like this?
I said from the very start, actually, that I'll talk about Bitcoin. I will not shut up about Bitcoin till it's the base layer of the financial industry. And if that happens, if it's the base layer of our financial industry, it's probably pretty boring to talk about it. And I find it pretty boring to talk about it. I'm probably along the way a little bit earlier find another thing that I'm more interested in it, because it will get boring over time. Just like Bitcoin is at $2 million, $5 million each. It's critical infrastructure. Every politician in the world has to adopt it. There's no critics because it's just like the internet, a critical part of our society. It's just like electricity, a critical part of our society. What is to talk about a Bitcoin? Like if you're not orange pilling or educating people on Bitcoin, what are you doing? And so if we get to that point, or I can see the horizon, I probably don't pack up my bag and I am somewhere on an island. I don't think I'm that kind of a guy. I might change. I don't know. But I might just talk about something else or might just do something else. There's a lot of exciting things to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the greatest part about the future is that it's never quite exactly how we anticipate it. So you never know what AI, all these, and then the latest technology always creates the next technology. So I think you and I are going to see a whole lot of cool stuff happen in our lifetimes. So it'd be interesting to see if, we come to this moment of base layer, maybe you're just talking more niche Bitcoin. Maybe you're just, only talking about Lightning or some other development in Bitcoin, right? You never know. But another question, I know we're at past the hour mark here, Robin. So I'll ask you another question and we'll get to the end of this. But, obviously you're a big guy, self-custody. You already mentioned that the most exciting thing about Bitcoin to you is always the ability of self-custody. And I agree with you. Obviously, this is a revolutionary thing with Bitcoin and the evolution of money. But how do you approach this with newcomers? Because obviously, taking self-custody is not for everybody. But this is your approach. So when you onboard people into Bitcoin, are you getting them into self-custody right away? Or are you having them join on some central platform until they learn a little bit more?
That's a really important question. I learned self-custody from day one. So the first day where I bought Bitcoin was also the day where I bought my first hardware wallet, where I also looked at videos how to do self-custody. And forcing yourself to do it from day one is a really nice learning experiment. I wouldn't do it with all your wealth. If you're going all in on the first day, don't do it. Do it with like a small amount of Bitcoin that you're comfortably able to lose. If you say, hey, my net worth, let's say, is 100K, and you put in $500 on self-custody and the remaining you leave on a trusted exchange. If you lose that self-custody thing, not that bad. If you mess something up, not that bad. And slowly over time, you will gain more confidence. You will gain more knowledge. You will gain more wisdom in dealing with self-custody. And that's where you want to put more and more of that number go up token and convert it to number go up token and freedom go up token. You want to convert it to it being more in your control. But take your time. Nobody's forcing you to do self-custody on day one. Nobody's forcing you to put all your money either in self-custody or on exchange. And so that's my general advice. Take your time, learn, get help. There's a lot of help out there. A lot of great products, a lot of great services, a lot of educational material. You're not alone. Now AI can also help you. But be careful with high and critical, sensible information, like where Bitcoin is stored, because you're not only talking to AI, you're also talking to an online connection. You're talking to a company that gets processed and potentially could be misused by attackers. So what I will say is self-custody, do it no matter who you are or what your knowledge base is, but be careful with it and don't just trust your first self-custody setup to carry all your 100K net worth that you have from the starting. Ease into it. Like there's no rush. Don't do it with rush. If you do something in rush, it usually ends up bad.
Yes. Again, well said. Yeah. I mean, I had onboarded somebody and went right into the cold storage right off the get-go. And they had messaged me a little after and said they were so happy that they went down this road because this was their mindset was not to touch this. This is something for the long term. So especially if you have this long term holding capability where you don't have to touch this money. Yeah, I think it's a really good experience to just learn storage. And really, it's not that difficult. But it's the responsibility is just so high, right? Like anyone, I don't know. I feel like anyone can get the concept of writing down a password and storing it. Obviously with MicroSeed, engraving that into steel is a lot more robust. But just the general idea doesn't seem as difficult to me as just the big amount of responsibility it is where you have there's no third party to reverse this transaction. But yeah, just with talking to so many Bitcoiners that you have, Robin, what do you see the most common gap in knowledge when talking to so many Bitcoiners?
That's an interesting question. What's the most common gap of knowledge? You mean from the guest or from
It doesn't have to be in Bitcoin per se, but maybe it's in because Bitcoin's obviously political. It's computer science. It's financial, economics. It could be a gap in other parts of their knowledge as well.
I think there are a lot of gaps in different parts of the Bitcoin community, and with different people, there are different gaps. I would firstly mention. If I had to pick one, I'll go with something controversial. In the Bitcoin community, we have often that conspiracy theory had a little bit too much on. What I mean by that is, once something that obvious as money breaks in your head, you start questioning everything else, which is good. But sometimes I feel like Bitcoiners are taking it too far. They are questioning things that are legit, and they're trying to puzzle piece conspiracies together just because they found 2 missing pieces. They haven't gotten the other 80. But just from those 2 pieces, they're trying to guess how the full picture is looking like, which I sometimes find not a good sign of the Bitcoin community, that you're going down different rabbit holes with not as much nuance that we would like to have. And that's all what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot of weird conspiracies in Bitcoin where I'm like, are you sure? Like, I don't have the evidence against that, but you also don't have the evidence for it. So why are you going down that rabbit hole? Why are you dying on that hill? Like Bitcoin is a better hill to die on. So I leave it vague like that. But there's a lot of things that I just think you could do a better job in researching, and don't assume the full picture. If you have 10 out of 80 puzzle pieces, the picture could look very different than you think.
You know, I really tend to agree with you there. There's a lot of conspiracists in the Bitcoin, and maybe that's just, they feel passionate about one thing, they feel so passionate about another thing, but you can often be really dead on with something, but completely off on other things, right? You see a lot of one-dimensional type of people out there, but that was well said. When we don't have to get into all those details and get too controversial, but I've definitely experienced a lot of that. So Robin, I'm gonna open it up here. You get to. Obviously, you've had a lot of practice asking questions. Want to open it up and give you an opportunity to ask me a question. Complex, simple, anything.
What is the Bitcoin development that you expect that will happen in the next 10 years that you think most of the Bitcoin community will disagree with you?
Wow, very interesting. I feel like that's a loaded question. Maybe I shouldn't have given you the mic for the question. Wow.
Yeah, I get it. I have the end routine on my podcast where the previous guest asking a question for the next guest. So I got about 800 different ideas for those kind of questions. And this was one that actually came up 2 or 3 times already. And I just love that question because it kind of is like, what do I believe in? What most people don't believe in my own community, in my own small world. That's kind of the question, the core of the question.
Man, I mean, something that comes to my head, I do believe there is potential for widespread self-custody, which I think a lot of people don't believe is possible. You have people like myself and you who, want to onboard people with this. And as people become more knowledgeable with AI and the internet, this is all still within my lifetime, right? So we're still going to see humans develop a lot and become much smarter people. Young people are so smart these days. And yeah, with tools like Bitcoin, you become so much more individualistic. And I think having that capability is something that comes to my head, but I might have to take this one with me, and maybe next time we talk, maybe give a better answer for that. But that's something that does come to my mind, that widespread self-custody is possible.
I have one follow-up question for you. In self-custody, if you think about this getting the mass adoption, how do you define self-custody? And I'll make a specific example so it's easier. If Apple came out with a Bitcoin wallet that sits on your iPhone and you have 2 out of 3 multi-sig where with your MacBook and your Apple Watch and your iPhone, you could sign a transaction, would that count as self-custody even though you don't control the node, you don't control the hardware, and it's closed sourced?
Ooh, if it's closed source, I don't think so, because there needs to be some reassurance by the user that they actually have self-custody, or I guess that the party providing the service doesn't have some sort of backdoor. And without open source, I mean, you're just kind of having belief in this company. So with that example exactly, I will say no, but I like the idea that you just said, and I think something like that might be maybe possible in the future. But as you just said there, I don't think that would be constituted as self-custody, but maybe we do find this medium of self-custody and custodial service. Maybe this is part of the infrastructure buildup that we're going to see. Yeah, what do you think?
I also have no clue. That's why I'm asking, because there's this thing when email came out, everyone thought that we all run our own email servers, and now everyone is running on Gmail. I mean, not everyone, but like a lot of people are running on Gmail. And then so you have then people think, okay, we should run all our own Bitcoin nodes and Bitcoin servers, and still like only a handful of people actually do it in the Bitcoin community. And how many people do self-custody? How many people do self-custody and run their own node? Like very select few, I think. And so if there's a convenient solution, which big enterprise like Apple or Microsoft or Samsung or whoever could easily provide, I think the masses will flock in there and they don't care about running their own node. So like, I wish it wouldn't be like that, because I even have a self-custody company. So I'm even biased to believe the other way around, but it's hard not to see that. It's hard not to see huge companies embracing self-custody to get another ecosystem piece in their favor. As, for example, Apple embraced having two-factor authentication with their phones, having a password manager on their phones directly. They might just embrace having your Bitcoin directly on your iPhone in a self-custody fashion with two out of three multisig. And which Apple user wouldn't use that if you also have Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. I'm sure you could talk the pros and cons to that. And again, like I think a lot of it comes down to the users levels of entropy. Like there's maybe this level is slight, little, it's secure, but not as secure. If you have this belief of government overreach, then maybe, having this on your MicroSeed, your steel plate there, this is going to be stronger for maybe us old school Bitcoiners, So yeah, different levels of entropy there I think will take place, but I'm sure there's a large portion of a market that they could get by providing a service like that. So that's quite interesting. Robin, what are the chances we can get you out here in Thailand one of these times and visit the Bitcoin Learning Center and see all the great things? Is that a possibility in the coming years?
100%, I will be there, but not sure when. But Thailand is on my travel list. And even more importantly, it's on my fiance's travel list. And so she wants to go there. I want to go there. We will be 100% there at some point. And if we're there, we'll probably be there for a little bit of a longer time. So we'll have some time to check out the learning center and see what you guys are doing there.
That's so cool, man. Yeah, it's awesome to see international people come through here all the time, and actually just this Bitcoin Learning Center itself, just attracting people, and of course all the events that they're putting on. They do marathons. Running is huge here in Thailand, so they're trying to go beyond the niche and like go into other sects of society, not just financial people, but runners and push Bitcoin out there and frame it as a financial freedom product, and not try to blast Bitcoin. I think there's some negative things if you put Bitcoin in the title sometimes, or some people have this negative feeling about it. So they kind of, going with this financial freedom angle. It's really cool. So it'd be awesome to have you out here and just see Thailand. It's super cool society and culture. So Robin, I will thank you for doing this today. If you don't mind just letting us know where we can follow you and learn more. And yeah, again, thanks for doing this today, man.
I'm sure there's somewhere on the screen or in the title or in the description my name hidden. If you just put my name, Robin Seyr, in your favorite podcast machine, in your favorite YouTube, in your favorite Twitter or social media platform, you'll find me there. And I'm always looking forward to messages from people that watch my guest appearances, watch my podcast. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you'd like to improve. Tell me what you think I should think about. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm right. I'm always looking for interactions with cool Bitcoiners.
Thank you, Robin. Thanks for doing this podcast, dropping all this Bitcoin fire. It's much appreciated. I know you're a busy guy out there. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much.